race riots, bloodbath was being thrown around a lot. And from what I've been trying to pay attention to, reading the paper and following the news, I was arguing that was ridiculous. You know, the people coming were nonviolent, they were pledged to nonviolence, they certainly weren't going to start anything. And they weren't the kind of, going to get a big fight if somebody attacked them. They knew how to deal with foolish, violent racists. But anyway, there was quite a media hysteria in the city. And I had a little piece that was on the CNN show last summer about that, which their producer followed up a little bit, with some evidence that there really was a media hysteria about violence that was going to be during this march. But not believing it, myself and two or three of the other people that work there said, well, I'm sorry, the city said, because there's going to be this terrible riot and bloodbath in the city.
On the day of the march.
On the day of the march, we're going to close the city. Everybody can stay home. And I think federal workers were given the day off too. I think that was an agreement with Bobby Kennedy and Barry Rustin. I know all the city workers were given the day off, so you don't have to get involved in anything. You can stay home and be safe. And we were told about do anything but like lock yourself in your house. So I said, no, nothing's going to happen, and I want to work. So they said, okay, well, you can come in. I think we had to come in like 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. Normally, like 7:30. Got to get in because they're going to close the bridges. And I don't remember how we got in or out. I don't remember if the Wilson Bridge was there or not. But got there early. Then we said, empty out our trucks. We had the GMC Suburban vans for the survey, and they like to still use those for survey crews. We took out all the boxes with this, we had, poles and the scopes and all that we used. Empty them all out in the parking lot so that they will be available to haul the dead and wounded off the mall. And then we were told to stand by to drive in and pick up the dead and wounded. And we go back inside. It's right at the end of the South Capitol Street Bridge. The streets are all different now, and there's no highway department office there. But you could see across to Bolling Air Force Base. That was occupied by the 82nd Airborne. They'd been brought in a few days before. I can remember tents being out in there, and they set up patrols around sort of each block. There was a Jeep with an officer in it and a radio man, and then there were guys with guns on the different corners. They said it was everywhere between there and the Capitol, and maybe, I don't know how much farther, toward the Washington Monument. 82nd Airborne was there to protect the city from the riot. And that was that attitude. So we got set up, we waited, and to my great relief for the whole thing was that, what the racists were all saying was, of course, the local black people will not go to this march. This will be outside agitators. This is the same crap they would say in Alabama and Mississippi. All the civil rights advocates are outside agitators. The local people, they're not going to be in there. Well, there was a steady stream of traffic coming out of Anacostia. Cars with Maryland and DC plates, full of people, and of course it was 23rd of August. It's hot, nobody had air conditioning. The windows were down, but people were dressed in Sunday clothes. The men and women were, I remember just about everybody was dressed up. With little pennants, so you could tell they were going to the march, because they marched on Washington on the radio antenna. And we watched them for hours. Just carloads, I don't know where they parked the cars, but the Armory was on past us. I don't know where they dropped the people off, but there were just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of carloads of people. So that made that point. And we stayed there until sometime in the afternoon. We didn't listen to the activity on the radio. TV apparently was on. I don't remember if we even thought of trying to listen to it. Or that it was probably on educational TV or something I wouldn't even listen to then. Sometime in the afternoon, because it became apparent nothing was going to happen. There wasn't going to be any violence. So I'm guessing sometime between 1 and 3, we got the word from somebody in city government said, y'all can go home. And I got home somehow. I must have been through Alexandria. Wilson Bridge must have been there, because I couldn't have gone through 14th Street Bridge. It would have been right through the middle of the march almost. But I got back to where my mother lived on King Street on Route 7. Then she lived in an apartment right near what we call Shirley Highway 95 and King Street. Got back over toward my mother's house and said, well, let me see if I could go in and see some of it. And so I started driving in towards the Pentagon, and you couldn't, there's that cutoff when you come up 95 at the Pentagon where you can go over toward the Memorial Bridge.
Mhm.
No, that was blocked off. I said, okay, well, I can't even see it. So I turned around and went home. And then what hit me was, could have been that night, it was the next weekend night, Friday or Saturday night after that, I had a little party at my mother's apartment. And a couple of my friends said they'd been at the march. And we had never, ever talked about anything serious. I said, okay, that's it. Any of these after that, I'm gonna be in it. I went back to college in a few weeks and started looking for, I had to find a really new set of friends. My old friends weren't Jehu racists, but they were people that were not going to rock the boat. They were not going to appear to be weird or outside of the norm. They were just wanted to be good old boys and have fun and whatnot. So I had to find new people to, well, it was, okay, I was a little sad about a couple of them. I thought we had more gumption than that, but that was what they were going to do, but I wasn't going to stay there. And I was in the civil rights movement in 2 or 3 months. Somewhat delayed by President Kennedy's assassination, but, set everybody right.
So what kind of things did you do in the civil rights movement?
Within a couple of months after President Kennedy was killed, that time I was the progressive, or whatever we might call liberal white students, there weren't very many at Lynchburg College, tended to be folkies, people into folk music. I've been a big rock and roller, and I always have been, but I was just, that time folk music was the stuff that was serious. It was serious and sensitive people who listen to folk music. We go to coffee houses and whatnot, but so we were talking a lot about racism, about civil rights stuff that was going on, and things that were happening in the Deep South. Then we were really paying attention to the news, and we would talk about that stuff with each other. What Dr. King was doing something. There was big stuff going on in southern Georgia, in Alabama, Mississippi. And at some point that winter, there was a group of peace marchers that came through Lynchburg called the Quebec to Guantanamo Peace March. It was a band the bomb peace march, but they were integrated. It was about 20, 30 people. And there were probably 3 or 4 black men and a couple black women with this group marching. They were going to walk they started in Quebec, Canada. They were going to walk to Miami, and then commit civil disobedience, take a boat against the rules to Cuba. This is the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We almost went to that nuclear war. So we need to stop all this crazy stuff of threatening the world because of communism. We need to make peace with those people. But they were going to do it as an integrated group. And we were really impressed with that. So my friends and I, for school, we ended up spending 2 or 3 evenings talking to those people. And as a result of course, first we heard really about nonviolence. Somebody talking to us about nonviolence, and these people were dedicated pacifists, and we sort of got an introduction to what all that was about. And they left, and that's a whole other story what happened to them. It took them over a year and a half to get through Georgia. They were just beat to hell in Georgia. They spent a lot of time in jail in Georgia. And Albany, they ran to Chief Pritchett, who was one of the most the archetypes of horrible racist sheriffs in the South. They ran right into Chief Pritchett in Albany, Georgia, and most of them spent about a year in his jail. But we got our peace buttons and our orientation to sort of pacifism and nonviolence. And within a week or so of their leaving, a teacher was fired from the local high school. The Lynchburg newspapers called for him to be fired. He was fired the next day because they found out he had one of the peace marchers in his class. He was a Quaker and had one of the nonviolent activists come speak to his high school class. He was out on his ear the next day. And just a little before that, the city had been rocked with an incident where an older white woman had been raped on, I can't remember the street, up near Randolph-Macon, women's college, and she reported she was attacked by a black man. And that the headlines of the paper were "Black Monster Stalks the City." And it was what was explained to me later by friends who were in the SCLC there, that they felt this was a payback for they'd been before I started college. Year and a half before, the sit-in movement had been in Lynchburg, and there'd been a few places desegregated, and some students from But anyway, this was to get back at the black community, reestablish arena there in the black community, and it kind of did. So we were upset about both these things, and firing of the teacher got us out there. So we decided we went out. I went out with maybe 4 or 5 students from Lynchburg College, and I think there were 3 girls from Randolph-Macon. Both schools were still all white, although Randolph-Macon wasn't officially all white. They might have had a few foreign. The way they did desegregation most of the times would bring in a few foreign students. So there were 8 or 9 of us. Went out and picketed the Lynchburg papers. You have to understand that the grandfather of the publisher of Lynchburg papers was Carter Glass the first. He was Carter Glass the third. And P. Carter Glass is the one who wrote Virginia's segregationist constitution.
The one from 1902?
Yes, yes. He was one of the authors of that constitution, and particularly influential in the anti-miscegenation pieces of that blacks and whites can't marry.
So he owns the newspaper that you're picketing.
Yeah, he owned the newspaper. His grandson owned it, and I think the junior owned it, and the third was the managing editor. So we went down and picketed them. Had no idea what we were doing, except that we just going to